In the spring of 1975, a high school marching band en route to a music festival disappeared without a trace. The case mystified authorities and devastated a small Texas town for decades until a massive sinkhole opened during a drought in 2015 and revealed the school bus eerily intact with chilling contents inside. The spring of 1975 was unusually warm in Dry Creek, Texas, and the dusty streets buzzed with the excitement of one of the town's proudest traditions, the Dry Creek High School Marching Band's annual trip to the Tri-County Music Festival in Abilene. For many of the students, it was more than a field trip. It was the first time they'd leave the county. For some, it would be the last. The band had rehearsed for months under the sharp eye of Mr. Felix Granger, the aging but respected band director. Parents stood in the high school parking lot that morning, waving and snapping pictures as 32 students ranging from first-chair trumpet to glockenspiel players climbed onto the old blue and white school bus. Alongside them were Mr. Granger, the school's assistant principal, Mrs. B. Russell, and Coach Donnie Kirk, who volunteered to chaperone. The driver was Harold Cleaver, a quiet, dependable man who had driven the band to competitions for nearly 10 years without incident. He showed up that morning, thermos in hand, and checked the tires with his usual diligence before climbing into the driver's seat. They were supposed to arrive in Abilene by noon. The bus departed at 7:41 a.m., according to Mr. Granger's clipboard log, which he'd recorded in careful cursive as always. The trip was meant to take a little over 2 hours. By 3:00 p.m., festival organizers began to worry. No one had called in sick. No students had arrived by car. By 3:30, Abilene police notified the Dry Creek Sheriff's Department. By 4:01 to Totini. Parents began to arrive at the school, eyes wide with panic. The initial assumption was a mechanical breakdown, but the roads were open, dry, and well-traveled. State troopers dispatched helicopters along the bus's known route, scanning roadside ditches and wooded cutoffs. No oil slicks, no glass, no skid marks. The bus had simply vanished. News spread quickly. The local paper ran the headline, "Dry Creek Band Bus Disappears en route to competition." Townsfolk gathered at the Baptist church where Pastor Don Wheeler led a candlelight vigil that stretched into dawn. The sheriff at the time, Ray Hollis, called in every available unit. Search crews canvassed the entire 30-mile corridor between Dry Creek and the festival grounds. They dredged streams, combed ravines, checked abandoned barns. Nothing. They didn't crash, Sheriff Hollis said in a radio interview. They didn't stop for gas. No one saw them pass. It's like they fell off the damn planet. In the absence of facts, theories bloomed like weeds. Some said it was an accident that had gone undiscovered. Perhaps the bus had plunged into a hidden gulch. Others whispered about a hijacking. A few muttered darker things about rituals, disappearances, Cold War kidnappings. There were rumors of a state truck convoy in the area that same morning, and at least one witness claimed they heard a strange siren at 8:30 a.m. near the old oil fields south of Havers. None of it stuck. The FBI was brought in for 2 weeks, but left with nothing to report. Their press release simply stated no evidence of a federal crime at this time. The school shut down for a week. The superintendent resigned. The remaining students returned to empty desks, lockers still decorated with good luck band signs that no one had the heart to tear down. Mr. Granger's small house remained untouched, as did Harold Cleaver's trailer on the east side of town. Coach Kirk's pickup truck sat under a tarp in his driveway, gathering dust. The only real clue, if it could be called that, was a partial report from a farmer named Rudd Calhoun, who lived off an unpaved road near Willow Crossing. He swore he saw a blue and white bus pass his field around 8:00 a.m. Didn't look right, he said. Wasn't on the highway. Headed toward the old limestone quarry which don't go nowhere. But the quarry was sealed off, had been for years. The road leading to it was washed out. Sheriff Hollis sent a team to check, but nothing turned up. Eventually, after weeks of dead ends, the search was scaled back. The town mourned. 32 students and 3 adults declared legally dead. 35 seats forever empty. A bronze plaque was installed at the school engraved with every name. Every year after that, on the second Saturday of May, the date of the festival, a line of fresh flowers appeared beneath it. No one ever saw who left them. By 1977, the official file on the Dry Creek band bus had been closed. No new evidence, no leads, no suspects. Just 35 names and a hole in the heart of a town. The plaque in the high school lobby remained polished, but the paint around it hardened like scar tissue. New students passed by the memorial on their way to class, some stopping to read the names, others barely glancing. Teachers still remembered the faces, still paused when they heard certain notes played during morning band practice. Sheriff Ray Hollis retired in 1981, gray-haired and exhausted. When pressed by a local reporter on his last day in uniform about the case, he only said, "I've seen plenty of things vanish out here, but never like that." In 1983, a freelance reporter named Edith Langston from San Antonio dug into the case for a regional magazine. She interviewed old witnesses, revisited maps, and requested federal documents under the Freedom of Information Act. Her story, "The Bus That Time Forgot," garnered local attention and sparked new interest. But weeks before publication, Edith received 2 unmarked letters. The first was a typed, unsigned warning, "Let sleeping roads lie." The second arrived in a blank envelope containing a single black and white photo of the Dry Creek band members, apparently taken on the morning of their departure. The photo wasn't part of any known archive. Everyone in it was smiling, but in the far corner, partially out of frame, stood a figure in uniform. A man no one recognized. Edith published the article anyway. Her editor was contacted 3 days later by a man identifying himself as Federal Security Oversight. The magazine was threatened with legal action if it continued to speculate on unverified events under sealed state review. Edith's next 2 planned follow-ups were pulled. Her files were stolen from her car a month later. She left investigative reporting in 1985. The case faded again. The town moved forward in small steps. A new sheriff, Alan McKee, was elected in 1990 and served quietly. Families of the lost children either relocated or grew silent. Some swore never to speak of it again, and yet the legends grew louder where the facts had failed. Local kids dared each other to visit the Willow Crossing path after dark. It was said you could hear a flute playing far away under the earth. Others claimed they saw the ghost of a bus reflected in the quarry's runoff pool. But by the late 1990s, the case was more campfire tale than tragedy. Until 2015. That summer brought the worst drought the region had seen in decades. Cracked earth. Riverbeds reduced to gravel. The county declared a state of emergency as cattle perished and crops shriveled to nothing. And then came the collapse. On July 2, 2015, near the long-abandoned route off Willow Crossing Road, where Calhoun had once reported seeing the bus, a large portion of earth gave way. The ground had grown brittle, hollowed by water erosion and forgotten tunnels from the old limestone quarry. What emerged was not just a sinkhole, it was a discovery that stopped the town cold. First responders arrived within an hour. What they found half-submerged in clay and rock was unmistakable, a long vehicle painted blue and white, its roof crushed inward, but largely intact. The number on the side was faded, but still visible. 12. Dry Creek Unified Schools. Sheriff McKee stood at the edge of the pit jaw slack. The bus was back, and so were the questions. The area was cordoned off immediately. Media vans arrived within the day. Former students, now parents and grandparents, came and stood behind the barriers, some in stunned silence, others in tears. Excavation was slow, delicate. The ground around the sinkhole remained unstable, and engineers worked carefully to shore up the earth. It took 6 days to fully expose the vehicle, and then the real horror began. Search crews and forensic experts opened the rear emergency exit first. Inside rows of warped seats collapsed metal and scattered artifacts, sheet music, a cracked clarinet, a crushed lunch pail with faded superhero stickers, and bones. Human remains dried, mummified, some tangled in seatbelts, others slumped in corners. But only 19 sets in total. 16 people were missing. 16 never left the bus. That wasn't the worst part. In the middle aisle, lodged under the third row, was an old tape recorder miraculously preserved. When recovered and cleaned, the tape inside was labeled May 10, 1975, Trip Log FG. Mr. Felix Granger's voice opened the recording. Log entry. 7:40 a.m. Bus has departed. Weather clear, spirits high. The first 20 minutes were benign. Granger's commentary, students laughing, faint notes of a flute scale being practiced. Then static, then screaming, then silence, then a whisper, something unintelligible. The tape ended abruptly with the sound of tearing metal, and no one had an explanation. The contents of the bus stunned the country. After nearly 4 decades of mystery, folklore, and grief, the recovery of bus number 12 should have brought peace. But the reality inside its rusted frame only deepened the questions and darkened the story. News coverage went national. Satellite trucks camped outside the Dry Creek Sheriff's Office. The media dubbed it the Sunken Band Bus Mystery, while podcasters dissected every frame of excavation footage, replaying the details with obsessive fervor. But no theory could explain the most unsettling fact: 16 people were unaccounted for. Of the 35 on board that day, only 19 partial or full sets of remains were recovered. And of those 3 were adult Mr. Granger, Mrs. Russell, and Coach Kirk. The rest were students. Some still wearing their uniforms, jackets bearing embroidered patches for percussion brass woodwinds, shoes tucked under seats. One flute, its mouthpiece missing, lay wedged into the ribs of the bus frame. The victims showed no sign of external trauma consistent with a crash. No broken limbs, no spinal damage, no blunt force injuries. They hadn't died in impact. According to the forensic pathologist's report, the most likely cause of death: asphyxiation. The bus had been buried, sealed, crushed, and oxygen deprived. A cave-in, a slow suffocation. Yet, there were signs of something else. The walls near the rear of the bus had been scratched, fingernails clawing at the glass seatbacks torn from behind. Some windows were fogged over from the inside, streaked with long, frantic smears. And near the front, scrawled into the aluminum panel behind the driver's seat, with something sharp, were 5 ragged letters: DOWN. It was unclear who had written it or what it meant. Was it a direction, a name, a warning? The tape recorder recovered from beneath the seats was sent to an advanced audio lab in Austin. There, forensic audio specialists restored and enhanced the final few minutes of the recording, uncovering sounds previously buried in static. First came the screaming, several distinct voices, panicked, overlapping. Then a single sharp "stop the bus." Then Granger again, voice shaking. He's not supposed to be." Then static, and then a low sound. A growl. Mechanical. Too deep for a human voice. Not quite a word. But chilling enough that the technician who cleaned the tape reportedly removed her headphones and didn't return to work the next day. The audio leaked online and was uploaded to YouTube, titled "The Last Sound from Bus Tuckerchon 12." Millions listened. Some claimed to hear words in the growl. Others insisted it was just damaged tape feedback, imagination. But for the families of the victims, it reopened the wound. Among them was Helen Cormick, now 63, whose younger sister Lydia had been the lead clarinet player. Lydia's remains were not among the recovered. They said they'd found her flute, Helen told a reporter. But not her, just her seat. She paused, and Lydia was scared of caves, wouldn't even go into the pantry if the light flickered. So why would she leave the bus? Another mother, Georgia Mantle, lost both twin sons, Michael and Travis. Only one set of remains was confirmed. Michael. There were always stories, she said softly, that some of them got out, that they'd been taken, that they were waiting. When asked what she meant, she shook her head and refused to elaborate. Sheriff McKee reopened the case as an active investigation. He dispatched ground-penetrating radar crews to the surrounding area. The sinkhole had exposed a larger cavity below, leading to partially collapsed tunnels, remnants of the old limestone mine that predated Dry Creek by nearly a century. The mine had supposedly been sealed in the 1940s after a series of fatal collapses. But now the question was whether the bus had fallen into a natural sinkhole or been deliberately driven off course. McKee requested the bus route maps from 1975. He compared them to GPS overlays studying every bend, intersection, and blind spot. One thing stood out. A narrow gravel turnoff listed as decommissioned by 1968 branched from Route 16 and looped near the old quarry site. It no longer appeared on most modern maps. The town called it Old Cutter's Road. It would have been almost invisible in the morning light, and it led straight to where the sinkhole had opened. But here's the problem: the turnoff had been gated, locked, chained. According to county records, the road had not been accessible to school transportation since 1971, which meant either the bus driver Harold Cleaver deliberately took the turn or someone moved the gate. Cleaver's body had been identified in the bus, but his keys were not recovered, and neither was his driver's log. As Sheriff McKee reviewed the old files, something else jumped out. Cleaver's employment record showed a brief suspension in 1973, reasons redacted. When McKee contacted the district's HR archives, they found the original file misfiled under custodial. In it, a handwritten note from a previous principal. Cleaver is not to be assigned isolated routes until cleared by counselor. Watch his meds. Meds. Mental health evaluations weren't part of regular driver vetting back then, but still, the note was a red flag. Had Cleaver suffered a breakdown, or had someone else taken over the wheel that morning? None of the students' fingerprints were found on the driver's seat, but one small, smudged handprint was found on the inside of the windshield facing outward, as if someone inside had tried to get the attention of the world before the bus slipped beneath the earth. The deeper Sheriff McKee's team dug into the quarry site, the stranger the picture became, both literally and figuratively. Geological scans revealed a honeycomb of forgotten chambers and passageways, some natural, others carved by decades-old mining efforts. Many had collapsed. Some led nowhere. But one led somewhere very specific. Roughly 50 yards from where the bus had been pulled, searchers found a narrow shaft that split downward at a severe angle. Too steep for a vehicle, too smooth to be natural. It was only about 5 feet high, and after clearing rubble, it extended farther than anyone expected, almost 90 feet before ending abruptly. At the end of the shaft, a door. Wooden, reinforced with rusted iron crossbars, and nailed shut from the outside. The team stared at it for a long time. No official maps marked any structure there. No plans, permits, or historic documentation. Sheriff McKee called for specialists, historians, structural engineers, and forensic archaeologists. They carefully removed the nails and pushed the door open. Behind it was a room cramped 8 feet square, with stone walls and a dirt floor. The ceiling had partially collapsed, but the room was intact enough to contain its haunting inventory. There were 13 small chairs, rusty, child-sized, a broken whiteboard, and a single band uniform folded neatly on the ground. Whoever had used the space whenever they had used it had done so with purpose. There were no remains inside, no blood, but traces of long-rotted food in old tins, a melted candle, and scratched into the stone wall faintly but unmistakably was a phrase, "We got out." The discovery set the media ablaze again. Now the narrative had changed. It was no longer just a missing bus. It was an escape. But who escaped, and how, and where did they go? Sheriff McKee assigned Deputy Laney Rhodes to revisit every family of the original missing students, particularly those not accounted for among the remains. Rhodes went door to door, revisiting grief long buried. and she uncovered something startling. 3 families had quietly moved out of Dry Creek in the year following the disappearance. 2 had changed their names. One, the Munsons, had no forwarding address at all, just a single note in the school registrar. Withdrawn due to relocation. Private education. Do not contact. The Munsons' daughter, Colleen, had been 15 at the time of the trip. Flute player. No remains. No trace. Presumed dead. But now Rhodes had a reason to believe otherwise. She tracked the Munsons through real estate records and found them living under a different name in New Hampshire. Retired. Reclusive. And when Rhodes knocked on their door, it was answered not by either parent, but by Colleen herself, alive. Now 55, the color drained from Rhodes's face. "Ma'am," she said softly, "we believe you were a passenger on bus number 12. Is that correct?" Colleen didn't answer immediately. She looked past Rhodes toward the driveway, where leaves blew in wide circles across the gravel. Then she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "I was there." Colleen was taken to a secure location for debriefing. She declined media requests, refused cameras. But with Sheriff McKee and 2 investigators present, she told the story she had buried for 40 years. "We were on the bus, driving the usual route," she began. "I remember the sun was high already. Some of us were singing. Felix Mr. Granger was marking scores. Then the bus turned." She paused. "We weren't supposed to turn. I knew that road. Cutter's Road. It was chained off." "Did the driver turn himself?" McKee asked. Colleen shook her head. "No. He was asleep." The room went still. "You're saying someone else was driving?" Rhodes asked. "Yes. A man got on at a stop just past Havers. He said he was from the district, that there was a detour, that the bridge ahead was closed. He had a badge and a clipboard." McKee's pen froze. What happened next? "He talked to Mr. Granger, something quiet. They argued. Mr. Granger looked scared. Do you remember this man's name?" "No, he never said it." "Could it have been Reed Granger?" She frowned. "That name doesn't sound right, but he had a scar on his neck. A long one, like surgery." She described the drive down Cutter's Road, how the pavement became gravel, then dirt, how the trees thickened, how they passed an old sign marked "Quarry Access, Danger," and then she said we dropped. The road beneath the bus gave way. A hollow sound, screaming, darkness. When I woke up, she said we were inside the bus but tilted sideways. A rock wall had crushed part of the roof. The back was caved in. She wept. Some of us were okay, some weren't. Mr. Granger had a broken arm. Mrs. Russell wasn't moving. Coach Kirk was alive but bleeding. We tried to stay calm, she continued. But the man, the one with the badge, he came back. Silence. He said help was coming, that we had to stay put. But we knew that wasn't true. Colleen's eyes were glassy, so we escaped. 13 of us. Through the rear exit, through a broken window. We climbed up the rock wall into the shaft. We found that little room, the one with the chairs. "Why didn't you come back?" McKee asked softly. "We tried," she said. "But we got lost in the tunnels. No light. Just sounds. Then something chased us." She looked up, and her voice cracked. Something that wasn't a man. The room stayed silent after Colleen's final words. Sheriff McKee stared at her across the table, notebook limp in his hand. Deputy Rhodes sat rigid, trying to parse what she'd just heard. Something that wasn't a man. Colleen leaned forward, hands trembling. "I know how it sounds. But if you're here for the truth, you're going to have to hear it all." "Tell us," McKee said. Colleen closed her eyes. The tunnels went on forever. Some of the kids got separated, 3 of them just vanished. The rest of us tried to stay together. We found that little room with the chairs. There was water in one of the stone cracks and old tin food someone had left. We stayed there overnight, we thought. Could have been longer. She opened her eyes again, voice hoarse. But we weren't alone down there. What do you mean? Rhodes asked. There were sounds. Breathing. Rocks shifting. Footsteps that didn't sound right. Scraping like metal claws on stone. Could it have been an animal? McKee offered. Colleen gave a hard look. I've heard coyotes. I've heard wild dogs. This wasn't that. Rivas would later read the transcript and underline the next sentence 5 times. It waited in the dark. It watched us. Like it was learning. Colleen didn't describe the creature further. Just the fear. The feeling of being stalked. We left the room after 2 nights. Or 3. We tried to go back toward the surface, but the way had caved in. That's when we lost 2 more. Names? McKee asked gently. Colleen listed 4 students previously among the presumed dead. Their bodies hadn't been in the bus. We came to another passage. Narrow. 1 girl crawled through. Never came back. The rest of us. She paused. We found a ladder. A wooden one. Led to a trap door in the ceiling. It opened into a boarded-up barn outside of Dry Creek. We walked for hours. Dirty, bleeding, covered in dust. We knocked on a door, and Rhodes asked. 2 men in black coats came to the door. Not police, not locals. They told us we were trespassing. And then they took us. McKee raised his eyebrows. Took you. They said we were in danger. That we had seen something we weren't supposed to. They separated us. Colleen wiped her eyes. I never saw the others again. I was moved across state lines, given a new name. My parents were told to keep quiet or risk prosecution. They agreed to that, Rhodes asked in disbelief. They thought they were protecting me. The people who came, they weren't offering a choice. McKee leaned back, heart pounding. You're saying the government covered this up? I'm saying someone did. Someone who knew what was under that quarry. And what was under it? Colleen exhaled shakily. A place. Like a facility. Half-built, half-ancient. I saw things etched into the stone symbols. Patterns that made my head hurt to look at. The others did too. You're describing some kind of underground structure? McKee asked. Yes. Something older than us. But someone tried to use it. To study it. Or contain it. And we got in the way. Deputy Rhodes rubbed her temples. So why surface now? Why tell this now? Because I thought it was over. I thought no one would ever find that bus. But now that you have others will come. They'll try to take this from you. Or bury it again. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small cloth pouch. Inside was a rusted object, cylindrical, no bigger than a pencil. It had strange grooves along its sides and an eyelet at the end, like a charm. I took this from one of the tunnels, Colleen said. I don't know what it is, but the men in black asked if I had anything. I lied. I kept this. McKee took it carefully, cold to the touch. He'd never seen anything like it. Back at the excavation site, radar had detected another void, larger, deeper beneath the original chamber. Access was dangerous, but an ROV camera was lowered. What it captured in its flickering footage left the operators stunned. The chamber below was enormous, with carved stone pillars stretching like ribs in the dark. At the far end was what looked like a door, metal circular and embedded into the rock. Symbols matching the grooves on Colleen's object were faintly etched around it. Just before the feed cut out, the camera's mic picked up a low hum. It wasn't machinery. It sounded alive. Back in Dry Creek, old residents whispered of dreams returning, of hearing drums in the dark. One child, a descendant of a lost band member, drew a picture in school of a man with no face under the ground. The sinkhole had opened, but something else was waking. The footage from the ROV was immediately classified by the Texas Office of Emergency Management. Officially, the site was sealed due to geological instability. But Sheriff McKee wasn't buying that, especially not after what he and Deputy Rhodes had just heard from Colleen Munson, or whatever name she'd been living under for the past 4 decades. The small cylindrical artifact she had handed over was now under guard in the county evidence locker. A local metallurgist analyzed the object and found its alloy didn't match anything on record. It wasn't radioactive. It wasn't magnetic. But when subjected to a low-frequency vibration test, the artifact emitted a faint resonance like a tuning fork that hummed just beneath the threshold of hearing. And even more troubling, every time the artifact was touched, it warmed slightly. Not from external heat, from within. Meanwhile, at the Sinkhole site, additional probes were forbidden. A black SUV bearing federal tags arrived at 2:00 a.m. the next morning. The men inside didn't check in with local authorities. They posted tape-erected scaffolding and within 48 hours had built a tarp enclosure that covered the entire pit. Dry Creek was told the excavation was over. Too dangerous to continue, the mayor repeated during an emergency meeting. We're turning it over to state geological teams. Sheriff McKee was furious. This is our town, our kids. That bus sat under our feet for 40 years. We deserve answers, but no answers came. Deputy Rhodes dug into archival satellite images. Her husband worked IT for the local utilities and helped her overlay seasonal data. One thing stood out: since 1975, the area surrounding Cutter's Road had shown signs of unnatural subsidence. The ground was slowly sinking in a wide radius. Subtle. Undetected by most. Like something breathing. Rhodes also tracked down a former military engineer, now retired in Austin, who had worked on Cold War subterranean facilities. When she showed him stills from the ROV footage, he went pale. I saw designs like that once, he said. Not U.S. origin. Something we inherited. Dug into by mistake. Dug into what she asked. He didn't answer. Just said close that place. And don't go looking again. Back in Dry Creek, strange events began to occur. First came the noise. Residents near the outskirts of town reported hearing low droning sounds after midnight, like a foghorn deep underground. Then came the animals' dogs, barking at nothing. Cows refusing to cross old fence lines. Deer found dead near Willow Crossing with no visible wounds, just collapsed lungs and ruptured eardrums. And then there were the dreams. People began to speak of the music, a haunting tune, familiar yet wrong, echoing through sleep. Several reported the sound of flutes, soft, slow, playing in the dark. One student at Dry Creek High, 17-year-old Noah Jenner, suffered a panic attack in the band room after practicing solo. He said he heard someone playing along with him from behind the music closet. The room was empty. Later that week, he vanished. His shoes were found in the staff parking lot. Nothing else. Colleen Munson was placed under protective watch, but 3 nights later, she disappeared from her hotel room in Lubbock. The door was locked from the inside. No signs of forced entry. Just a single message scratched into the window condensation. Down. Sheriff McKee convened an emergency session with the town council. He demanded that the site be reopened properly, excavated, documented publicly. But before the motion could pass, the council received a cease and desist letter from the Department of Energy. National security interest. Do not proceed. Risk of geological destabilization. At home that night, McKee found his office safe open. The artifact was gone. The footage file from the ROV gone too. He sat on his porch in the dark, wondering if the thing Colleen described, the one that wasn't a man, was still under Dry Creek. If it had ever left. And then the ground trembled. Just a little. A soft pulse like a bass note through soil. He looked at the trees. They swayed in sync with nothing. The sky was moonless. In the stillness, a sound began to drift through the air, soft, nearly imperceptible. A flute, playing the same 4 notes over and over. An old marching tune, twisted and slow. McKee rose from his chair, heart thudding. He knew the melody. It was the song the Dry Creek Marching Band had practiced in 1975 for the Tri-County Music Festival, a song never performed until now. The next morning, Dry Creek awoke to silence, the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful but expectant. Sheriff McKee stepped into the station to find Deputy Rhodes already pacing. She looked pale, clutching a manila envelope tight against her chest. "I had a dream last night," she said before he could speak. "I know that sounds ridiculous," but she paused, eyes trembling. "It was the band. I saw them marching. Not on the field, but underground. In the tunnels. They weren't alive." McKee didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. "I heard the music too," he said. Rhodes nodded and passed him the envelope. "This came early this morning. No postmark, no return address. Just dropped in our slot." Inside was a set of photos, faded Polaroid's edges curled from age. They depicted a series of underground corridors. The images were dim, torchlit. But what stood out were the markings on the walls, deep circular carvings similar to those seen around the Sinkhole door. In one photo, a group of children stood facing a stone panel, their faces blank, their clothes old-fashioned. "Are these the kids?" McKee asked. "I think so," Rhodes whispered. "But the photos are dated, get this, May 13th, 1975. 3 days after the bus disappeared." There was also a note, scrawled in jagged handwriting on yellowed notebook paper. "They kept playing. They had to. It sleeps when it hears the song." It was signed with just one letter, C. Colleen, except Colleen had vanished. That night, under growing pressure from state officials, the Dry Creek Town Council voted to demolish the remaining structures near the sinkhole. The excuse was public safety, but the truth sat behind closed doors. The ground was moving, quietly, unnaturally. A geological team had placed seismic sensors near the quarry after the initial collapse. Though data was officially embargoed, one whistleblower leaked a plot to Rhodes. It showed pulsed activity from beneath the earth, steady, rhythmic like a heartbeat, a slow one. And then it accelerated briefly on the same night Colleen disappeared. By the following week, strange signals began interfering with local broadcasts. AM radio frequencies picked up garbled transmissions, snatches of music flute solos, played at impossible speeds, sometimes backward. CB radios buzzed with phrases like, "We're still here and don't stop the song." Then came the bus. Not the one already excavated. Another one. At 2:41 a.m. on a fog-heavy night, the abandoned depot outside of Dry Creek lit up with motion sensors. The depot hadn't been used since 1986. Its gates rusted shut, but the cameras installed recently as a precaution caught it. A blue and white bus number, faded lights off, coasted silently into the depot lot. It parked. No one exited. When deputies arrived 8 minutes later, the lot was empty. Except for a single seat cushion embroidered with the Dry Creek Marching Band logo left neatly in the center of the lot. It was clean, new. Sheriff McKee convened a town-wide lockdown the following day. He issued an emergency statement. "We believe there are people, possibly survivors out there. Possibly others who are not. Until further notice, no one is to enter the quarry site. No one is to investigate the tunnel systems. And no one is to follow the music." But it was too late. Curiosity had taken root. Online forums swarmed with theories: the Dry Creek Portal Band of the buried Sinkhole Symphony. Amateur explorers began descending on the area. A group of urban spelunkers from Austin uploaded drone footage of the surrounding caves. It showed massive symmetrical formations, far beyond what a limestone mine should contain, rows of what looked like seats carved into the stone, arranged in a semicircle, facing a dais, a stage, and in the middle, a raised stone column upon which sat a metal music stand. No sheet music, just scratches, resembling notes. The video cut out 20 seconds later. All 4 spelunkers vanished. Their abandoned van was found a mile from the site. Inside a flute case. The instrument inside was still warm. In the days that followed, Dry Creek changed. People began reporting faces in reflections, Mirages of teenagers in marching gear blurred unmoving. Old-school records updated themselves, digital copies now listing previously deceased students as active. And always the sound of music. Just under hearing, a persistent melody, playing for something, or someone. Sheriff McKee, unable to sleep, drove alone to the quarry site one night. He parked outside the black tarp enclosure now manned by silent men in unmarked trucks. He didn't try to get closer. He just listened. The music was clear now. It wasn't just flute. There were drums, reeds, a low brass hum funereal measured. It was the Dry Creek High School fight song, slowed down, changed, transformed into something older. Deeper, he whispered to the wind. What do you want? The answer came not in words, but vibration, through the earth. Keep playing. By August, Dry Creek was no longer just a town. It was a story, a whispered warning, a phenomenon. The headlines had stopped being clinical. Texas town, haunted by musical mystery. They keep playing and something is listening missing. Since 1975, the band that never stopped. But within Dry Creek, no one was sleeping well. People spoke in hushed tones. Children hummed without realizing it. Several elderly residents who had been teens in 1975 reported waking with nosebleeds, disoriented, and unable to remember where they'd been. One claimed he had sleepwalked to the old band hall and woke sitting in the trumpet section. But there hadn't been a trumpet section in that building for 30 years. Sheriff McKee's mind had become a corkboard of impossibilities. Disappearances, fluctuations in underground heat, time slips, artifacts turning up in drawers that no one had opened in decades. Every night, the music returned low and slow and cruelly inviting. He no longer drove to the site. He didn't have to. The sound followed him home. Deputy Rhodes began compiling accounts from other towns along the old bus route. She discovered a cluster of incidents in 1976, all within 30 miles of the Dry Creek Quarry. Teachers quitting mid-semester. Reports of phantom bus engines near rural roads. One boy claimed a kid in a tuba uniform followed him through the woods, but vanished behind a tree. Rhodes also uncovered that in 1980, a privately funded foundation attempted to purchase the quarry land from the state for historical preservation. The foundation's board members were all former defense contractors. The deal had been blocked at the last minute. No reason was listed. More disturbing were the documents she found buried in the town hall archives, land surveys from 1951, long before the quarry was mined, showing symbols etched onto aerial photographs, symbols that matched those on Colleen's artifact. The notations written beside them read, "Avoid excavation resonation zones." McKee met with the only living geologist who had worked the original quarry dig in the 1940s. Now 94, wheelchair-bound and barely coherent, he still managed to mutter something chilling. "We drilled into a place we shouldn't have. It sang to us. And then it screamed." That same week, a rancher west of town called the sheriff's office in a panic. He'd found a bus tire deep in a sinkhole on his land. But not just any tire. This one bore a manufacturing stamp from 2023. It hadn't been there the day before. No roads led to that spot. No tracks, no other debris, and no explanation. The tire matched the model used on modern school buses, but with one difference: the sidewall bore a single word etched where the company name should have been. Encore. Then came the final message. It arrived as a voicemail on the sheriff department's tip line. The voice was distorted, crackling with static layered over what sounded like a distant band warming up. But one phrase came through clearly. "They need an audience. The concert isn't over." McKee replayed the message 12 times. Each time the background music changed slightly. Different instruments, different progressions, always dissonant, always reaching for something unfinished. That night, Rhodes disappeared. Her cruiser was found on the outskirts of the Sinkhole site driver's door, open keys in the ignition. On the seat, her badge and a photo. The photo was old, black and white, and showed the 1975 Dry Creek Band lined up at the festival. Except it had never made it to the festival. And in the back row, barely visible, stood a tall figure in a conductor's uniform. Face obscured, hands raised, as if he had always been conducting. But even more disturbing, written in faint pencil on the back of the photo was, "Rehearsal never ended." McKee stared at the image long into the night. Something in his bones told him it was more than a metaphor. By morning, Dry Creek was blanketed in fog, thick, unnatural sound swallowing. That afternoon, a transmission came through every radio in the county at once. No matter the station, no matter the signal, it was the band, the Dry Creek High School marching band, playing, crisp, unified, professional, as if they had never aged. The song was unfamiliar minor key swelling with layered horns and rising percussion. Then for precisely 6 seconds, every clock in Dry Creek stopped, then restarted. 2 seconds late, just enough for something to slip through. When the clocks restarted, something had changed. Not visibly, not at first, but Sheriff McKee felt it. The air seemed heavier, like it was being pressed from below. The fog didn't burn off that afternoon, nor the next morning. It lingered unnaturally, clinging to porch eaves and telephone poles, dampening sound and flattening light. He tried to radio Deputy Rhodes again. Nothing. Her voice never returned. But at 3:07 a.m. the following night, his home phone rang. A number he didn't recognize? He answered anyway. The line was silent for 4 seconds. Then a flute, 3 long notes, 1 sharp, played slowly. A whisper followed. "Don't let the curtain fall." And the call ended. McKee stared at the receiver for a long time. That day, he issued a county-wide bulletin under the title Psychosocial Disturbance Preparedness Advisory. He recommended families remain indoors at night and limit exposure to unauthorized broadcast signals or unfamiliar music. It was the first emergency advisory in U.S. history to reference melody as a threat vector. Meanwhile, reports escalated. Local hunters reported stumbling on what appeared to be campfire circles near the Sinkhole rim, surrounded by half-buried instruments. Trumpets, trombones, a drum with a broken head, all arranged like some ceremonial offering. Each instrument bore initials etched by hand, initials that matched missing students. The band room at Dry Creek High was closed after janitors found flutes floating upright in the mop bucket. No one had placed them there. And then came the girl. 16-year-old Clara Mason went missing during her lunch break. The security cameras showed her walking behind the school cafeteria toward the bleachers, and then simply not being there anymore. One moment she was visible, backpack slung over her shoulder. The next, the screen flickered. A faint musical trill played through the audio system, and she was gone. In her locker, investigators found a folded piece of sheet music, blank except for a single phrase handwritten at the top, "Coda for the hollow audience." McKee's hands shook as he held it. He knew what a coda was. The final passage, the end of the performance, except this one had no notes, only space. Silence. As if the music hadn't yet been written, or was still being written. Rhodes was still missing. No leads, no sightings. Her case had grown cold within weeks. McKee began visiting the Sinkhole every night. He stood at the edge of the enclosure, separated by the government-installed barrier, listening. The music was clearer now. It wasn't just the band. Voices sang beneath it. Faint but unmistakable. Chanting in harmony, sometimes rising in minor key crescendos that built and broke like waves. The language was unknown, strange vowels, impossible rhythms. But the cadence was unmistakable, a performance, a concert building toward something. McKee began writing in his journal at night. At first his entries were careful observations. Then they became timestamps of the sounds he heard. Then notations lines drawn in loops and curves, echoes of the symbols from the artifact. Until one night he wrote, "I think I've started to understand the score." He didn't remember writing it. That same night his dream returned. He was in the bus, but it wasn't broken. It was gleaming, Every seat was full. Students in immaculate uniforms sat upright, instruments in hand. The bus was moving, but not on wheels. It floated, gliding down a vast subterranean corridor lit by blue phosphorescent veins in the stone. At the front of the bus stood the conductor, face still hidden, batons raised. The band played, and in the distance ahead of them was a colossal gate carved into rock, etched with a musical staff and notes glowing like fireflies. The gate was opening. He woke in a cold sweat, hearing the final bars still lingering in the air. That morning he packed a bag. He drove to the station, typed up a final message, and left it in an envelope marked, "To whoever takes my place." It read, "The music isn't just memory, it's an invitation. We didn't find a sinkhole, we found a stage, and someone or something is still waiting for the rest of the band to arrive. They're not dead. Not exactly. They're part of something larger, a movement, a ritual, a performance that started in 1975 and hasn't ended. I'm going to listen to the whole song. If I don't come back, tell Dry Creek not to clap." He drove past the barricades. He parked where the sinkhole began. He walked in with his badge, his journal, and a flashlight, and was never seen again. But 3 days later, every speaker in the town radio, phone, intercom, and stereo crackled to life at exactly 7:41 a.m. The exact time bus No. 12 had departed in 1975. The sound that played, applause, followed by silence. The applause faded, but Dry Creek never returned to normal. After Sheriff McKee's disappearance, the Texas governor dispatched a special commission to investigate what had become known as the Dry Creek Resonance Event. But when the commission arrived, they found the sinkhole completely sealed, filled with sediment and water, as if nature had rushed in to erase what man uncovered. The tarp, the scaffolding, the guard posts gone. No sign of entry. No sign it had ever been disturbed. The commission's final report was bland and inconclusive, citing natural ground instability and localized psychosocial stress. But no one in Dry Creek believed that, because the music hadn't stopped. It simply changed. It now hummed from beneath manhole covers. It whistled between leaves. It tapped in percussive patterns on windows at night. Students at the high school reported dreams of practicing in stone chambers, though none of them were in the band. And worse, more names began to disappear from town records. Not just recent, old ones. One teacher reviewing an archived yearbook noticed a change. 5 students pictured in the 1974 graduating class had vanished from print. Their faces blurred, their names gone. One photo had been replaced entirely by the image of a tuba resting on an empty chair. No one could explain it. No one wanted to. The music teacher, Mrs. Bledsoe, retired abruptly after opening an old storage closet in the band room and finding a conductor's baton laid across a folded red sash, the Dry Creek colors. She swore she heard tuning notes echoing from the lockers as she left. The town slowly emptied. Families moved. Houses sold cheap. The population dwindled to less than a third of what it once was. Real estate listings warned buyers to expect intermittent signal disruptions and nightly fog. But some stayed, and they listened. Allison Morris, a journalist from Dallas, tried to write a book on the phenomenon. She conducted interviews, photographed the quarry, and even recorded some of the underground hums. She vanished 3 months later. Her final blog post included a single audio clip, 37 seconds, of what sounded like a marching band warming up. But when audio engineers ran it through a spectrogram, the visual signature of the waveform showed a symbol, a perfect treble clef, bleeding into an eye. The post's comment section was locked hours later by her publisher. Then came the parade. It happened on May 10th of 2020, exactly 45 years to the day since bus No. 12 disappeared. At sunrise, fog rolled in, heavy and thick. Locals who still lived near Main Street awoke to the distant sound of drums. When they looked out their windows, they saw them, marching, dozens of figures, silhouettes in full band regalia drifting soundlessly through the mist. No feet touched pavement. No breath steamed the air. They held instruments polished pristine. leading them a tall figure in a conductor's cloak, faceless beneath a brimmed hat baton raised like a scepter. As they reached the town square, the music swelled. But it wasn't haunting anymore. It was triumphant. Terrible. Final. One woman huddled with her children inside a bakery swore the band members turned and looked at her, each and every one of them, and smiled, then vanished with the fog. No one has seen them since. But the music still plays, sometimes faint, sometimes close. And each year on May 10th, at exactly 7:41 a.m., the speakers in Dry Creek, no matter how disconnected, broken or silent, crackle once more. And a single phrase plays always the same: encore. High school band vanished on field trip in 1975. 40 years later, a bus is found in a sinkhole, tells the haunting true crime meets folklore story of the Dry Creek High School marching band, whose 35 members and staff disappeared en route to a competition and were never seen again until 4 decades later when a massive sinkhole exposed their long-lost bus. The bus, found eerily intact with only 19 bodies, triggered an investigation that peeled back layers of buried secrets, forbidden tunnels, Cold War-era government interference, and the whispers of an ancient subterranean force that responded to sound. A surviving band member emerged from hiding, revealing that some of them escaped, but only into something far more terrifying: an underground labyrinth tied to rituals, music, and disappearance. As strange events plagued the town, ghostly music, mysterious reappearances, and electronic distortions, the townsfolk came to realize the band's vanishing wasn't an accident. It was a performance, a ritual that had never truly ended. When Sheriff McKee vanished after entering the tunnels to uncover the truth, the town descended into quiet dread. The music spread not just through air, but through time and memory, rewriting records, deleting names, drawing new players into its score. In the end, Dry Creek became more myth than town. A place where reality blurs into harmony, where every May 10th, the invisible band plays once more, not for applause, but to summon something long forgotten. Because the concert never ended. And some audiences never leave.